up and stupid do I have to be able not be able to answer the question of, look, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God. It's not my experience. I do not believe in God. But I am willing to say that maybe there might be one. I suppose it's possible. It's unlikely, and I don't think so. But it is possible that maybe there might be a God. Maybe. Maybe. No. Yes. Maybe. And the big book says this. It says, as soon as a man can say that he does believe, which I did not. As soon as he says a man does believe, or he is willing to believe, which I was willing to believe, we emphatically ensure him he's on his way. What does that mean? Emphatically, like, yeah, baby, you're done. In the bag. Step 2, over with. So if you're new and you're struggling with step 2, well, we just did it together. It's over. The question of step 2 is simply this. Am I willing to say that it is possible that there might be a God and I'm willing to go look for him? Now, what did that mean practically in my life? There's a great line in AA Comes of Age. It's a talk written by Sam Shoemaker, one of the great friends of early AA. And Shoemaker says that Alcoholics Anonymous is the scientific approach to spirituality. What does that mean? What was the action of the scientific approach to AA? What did I have to do? What action did I have to become willing to take for step 2 to become real in my life? And my sponsor explained it to me this way. He said that when a scientist wants to test something, he uses what's called the scientific method. Now, I am a used car salesman, which means you are here listening to spiritual pontifications of a used car salesman. So you should really check your mental and emotional status and just ask yourself. But anyway, right, I'm not a scientist. Maybe you're a scientist, right? But my understanding of the scientific method is this. If I want to prove from a scientific standpoint if something exists or not, what I do is I set up an experiment where I create the set of circumstances where if what I believe will happen. I set up a set of circumstances where I say, I believe if this and this and this, this will happen. And I set that up, and then without judgment, I watch the experiment unfold. And at the end of the experiment, either it was yes or no. And if it's yes, I had no dog in the fight. I go, okay, great, we proved the experiment true. And if the answer is no, I go, okay, great, we proved the experiment is false, and we move on to the next thesis. And this is what he told me to do with my life. He said, I want you to pretend that God exists. That's all I want you to do. I want you to live your life as if you believed in God. What does that mean? Well, if you're going to act as if a guy that believes in God in your work life, Sheldon, what would that look like? What would a guy do that had spiritual principles when he went to work? And what would that look like? Well, I suppose I'd get there on time. Yeah, maybe even a little early. Yeah, maybe. Maybe while I was there, I would do my job most of the time. Maybe I wouldn't steal nothing. Maybe I wouldn't tell my boss what an idiot he is. Maybe I'd stay all day. And maybe I wouldn't cause problems. Maybe that's what it would look like for me to have spiritual principles and act like God in my life, in my job. And so that's what I did. Now, it did not make me believe in God right away. It did get me a promotion, which was magical to me, right? What would it look like in my relationship if I acted like a guy that believed and trusted in God, that had spiritual principles in his relationships? What would that look like? Well, it would look like I would be a man of honesty and integrity. It would look like a man that treated my girlfriend at the time with respect. It looked like a guy that did what he said he was going to do when he said he was going to do it. And I did that stuff. And it didn't mean that I immediately believed in God. But I did end up getting married to that girl, and we're still married today. That is, we'll be 20 years in October. It did mean that. What would it look like if I treated my parents and my friends and my AA group and all the activities in my life the way that a guy believed in God would act? What would that look like? And to live your life that way. And then he said, and periodically what we're going to do is we're going to check in on your life. Let's give it 6 months. And we'll see if your life gets better or not. And if it does, then we're proving, the scientific experiment is proving that maybe God exists. And if it doesn't, then maybe we're proving that he doesn't. But let's live our life as if God exists and see what happens and watch the results. And that's what I did. I tell you, this is not true for a lot of people, but it is true for some. Some people have shared my experience. I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for 4 or 5 years before I could honestly tell you that I believed in God. Now, I had been active in the steps for all of that time. I had done 4th step, 5th step. I was doing my best at 6 and 7. I was paying amends, doing 8 and 9. I was doing inventory, and I was doing prayer and meditation. I was doing 11, and I was doing 12-step work. I was an active member of AA at 4 or 5 years sober. And, of course, if you asked me in the meetings if I believed in God, of course I would lie to you and say that I did. But I'm not really sure that I did. But I will never forget driving up to my sponsor's house at about 4 or 5 years of sobriety, as I had done every Tuesday night for my entire sobriety, going to a book study that he has at his house. And I started to cry. And this wasn't tears of pain, this was tears of joy, tears of relief. And I get to his house and he says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing. Nothing's wrong. Why are you crying?" "I don't know." "You know what it is?" "What?" "It's real." In Alcoholics Anonymous, we use this phrase, we say act as if. Act as if. And we don't mean act as if everything's okay, we mean act as if God's got your back. And at 4 or 5 years of sobriety, I realized I wasn't acting anymore. That something had happened inside of me that had moved me where I believed that God was real. The reason I tell you this story is because if you're like me, I come to Alcoholics Anonymous in my first couple of years of sobriety, I think there's something wrong with me because I'm not lit up on the God train. I'm not connected and on fire the way that people that have got 30, 60, 90 days seem to be. They did step 2, they did the 3rd step prayer, and all of a sudden, man, me and the big guy are woo, woo, right? And I didn't feel that way because not everybody's experience is like that. In the spiritual experience, it talks about how sometimes people's experience is this miraculous and that's a real experience, and it's their experience, but some of us have this educational experience, this slower experience. One is not more powerful or real than the other. They're both as amazingly truthful, but my experience was a slower experience. I will tell you this, if I had waited till I was 4 or 5 years sober to do a 3rd step prayer because I hadn't finished my 2nd step, to write an inventory because I hadn't done my third step prayer, to share the inventory because I hadn't written the inventory, to attempt to do 6 and 7 because I hadn't shared the inventory, to make any amends because I wasn't doing 6 and 7, and to continually inventory my life and to look for God in 11. If I had waited to feel God in my soul before I did those things, I would have died drunk. I have no way of proving it, but I believe it's true with everything in me. And so step 2 for me is this simple idea where really what I'm saying is, I'm not sure if God's there or not, but I'm going to go look for him. I'm going to go look for him. And he will reveal himself to me or he won't. I will find him or I won't. But I am going to become willing to start to look. And that is the sum total of my 2nd step experience. Don.
Don alcoholic. Thanks, Sheldon. And as we come out of the 1st step, and as Sheldon so eloquently put it, and realize that we are screwed and that there's no real hope, to make matters worse, to add insult to injury, we find out that the solution is God. And that's difficult for many of us. And we all have different reasons, but it's prejudice. We've turned our back on him. I believed it once, but I've been gone a long time. It's our experience, this reservoir of information, this cart filled with pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. It's the things we're embarrassed about. If there is a God, I don't want to meet him. He's probably a little upset with me. I haven't been treating his kids very well lately. And so I have a problem with the whole idea of it. But good sponsorship, I think, as much as anything, rears its head where the second step is concerned. And it takes my intellect out of the process. You know, I got a sponsor assigned to me my second night in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that wasn't done in AA. I didn't know anything about AA. I was in rough physical shape. I'm detoxing in the rooms. And the next thing I know, without my permission, I might add, I have a sponsor, I have a home group, I have a set of meetings I'll be going to. And the reason I know that is he had a meeting director and he circled me and said, these are the meetings you'll be going to. And I just assume that's what's done in AA. I don't know any different. I didn't know that some places they tell you to check things out. And, you know, we tell new people funny things, too, about sponsorship. It's very funny. One of my favorite things that we tell new people that just got here is they hear about sponsorship, and we tell them to get a sponsor. In fact, every meeting I go to, there's something about sponsorship in the format. Get a sponsor, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. And we say things like this: find somebody that has what you want. Huh. I wonder what I would have wanted my second night of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, I don't know. Maybe a pharmaceutical rep with a spare Cadillac, you know? Because I'd have never picked the guy that they assigned to me, you know what I mean? Because he was everything I wasn't, you know. Soft-spoken, sleight of frame, bald of head, wire-rimmed glasses, and he was in love with God. And he was not a guy that got that memo about not hitting the new person with God too early. You don't want to scare him out of AA, because he was talking about God the first time we met, what God did for him, what God did for you, what God did for them, what God was going to do for me, and he was expecting a miracle, and he was on fire with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you, what I remember about him and the way he presented this God idea to me, it wasn't what he said so much as the way he said it. Because what he had at his disposal was spiritual enthusiasm. He was a guy that had found an answer, and he was giving it away that night. He didn't really care what anybody thought about that. He wasn't going to dim his light for me. He was going to talk about exactly what had happened for him in his own words and his own experience. And there's something about being in front of somebody that has that spiritual enthusiasm, that's a man that's found the real answer. As the book says, armed sufficiently with facts about himself, who's found this solution, can genuinely win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a couple of hours. And the book also says, until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So it wasn't what he said, it was the way he said it. And a guy I just met in a couple of hours had my confidence. For some reason, I wanted his approval. I didn't know why. And I remember my third night in Alcoholics Anonymous, my second night with this man as a sponsor. Now the meetings are over. We've gone to a couple meetings that night. We're hanging out together. And he's talking to me about what he wants me to do when I get home that night. He says, when you get home tonight, I'd like you to get down on your knees next to your bed. And I'd like you to thank God for keeping you sober today. And I interrupt him. I go, well, I don't believe in God. And he didn't even miss a beat. He goes, that's okay. He believes in you. So get down on your knees. And thank God for keeping you sober. Now, tomorrow when you get up, and I interrupt him a little more forcefully, you're not listening to me. I don't believe in God. And he goes, oh, man, if you keep interrupting me, kid, this is going to take all night. Let me finish. He goes, when you get up in the morning, I want you to ask God to keep you sober that day. And I said, well, listen, I don't believe in God. He goes, listen, stand up. What? Stand up. So I stood up. He goes, great, sit down. I sat down. He goes, your knees work. You can pray. And I said, what? You just want me to take this action? You want me to do this prayer and I don't even believe in it? And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do. And he said, humor me. He goes, take an action you don't believe in. Humor me. He goes, have you ever prayed? Have you ever prayed on a regular basis? I said, well, no, I know. He goes, how do you know it doesn't work? I don't know. I'm just smart that way. Okay, we're not going to do this anymore. You don't get to tell me it doesn't work until you start to do it. So now I'm at home, feeling silly. You know, it's funny. I would lay in the gutter drunk and judge you as you walk by. Where'd you get those ugly shoes? Yeah. Now I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a sponsor and a home group. I'm being asked to do something as simple as say a few words on my knees next to my bed, and I got the door locked, the drapes closed. And I'm not thinking deep spiritual thoughts like, does God exist? Is there a common father and we're all his children? Does he really care about us? Could this be true? I'm thinking this. Should I be dressed for this? Should I? That's my big spiritual question. I get to the clubhouse the next night. My sponsor asked me if I prayed. I said, yes, I did, but I got a question for you. He said, what's that? I said, well, should I be dressed when I pray? You know, it was the first time I saw that look on his face that I was going to see many times over the next few years. And you know that look where he used to ask his sponsor, why do I get all the sick ones? And his sponsor told him why. And he just shook his head and grabbed his forehead like he always did. And he said, listen, God made you. He knows everything about you. I just don't want to ever hear about it again. And so now I'm praying. In Bill's story, Bill's coming to the end of his rope. He's drinking himself to death, and he knows it. He has no illusions that he's ever going to be sober. He's been to Towns Hospital a couple of times and gets drunk shortly after being released. And he knows that sobriety isn't in the cards for him. And he's sitting there on a Saturday, and he's thinking with some satisfaction that he has enough gin hid around the house that he can make it through the entire day. And there's a sadness as he's reflecting on his life, and he's thinking about his wife and how much he loved her and how sad it is that it's going to end this way for him. Because after all, there was much love at one time in their life. And while he's doing that, the phone rings, and it shakes him out of his reverie, and he picks it up, and it's a childhood friend of his that he hasn't heard from in a long time, and it's Ebby T. And he excites Bill, because Ebby's an old drinking buddy. And he's thinking, oh, this is great. This is just what I need at this time. And Ebby will come, and Ebby will drink with me, and we'll rekindle, and we'll tell the old stories about the old days, and it'll be an oasis in the sea of futility. And Ebby shows up at Bill's house, and he's fresh-skinned and clear-eyed, and there's something about him that's different, and Bill can't put his finger on it, and he pours Ebby a drink, and he pushes it towards Ebby, and Ebby pushes the drink back, and he says, I'm not drinking. And Bill goes, well, you're not drinking. What's this about? And Ebby says, I got religion. And Bill goes, oh, so that's it. Last summer, alcoholic crackpot, now he's got religion. He goes, that's okay, let the old boy rant. Besides, my gin will last longer than his ranting. And what Ebby starts to do is he doesn't rant, and he doesn't preach, and he doesn't deliver a sermon. He starts talking about in a simple way about this God that he found in his life and what's happened to him. And Bill's intrigued, and he's listening to this, but every time that Ebby starts to get a foothold in Bill's intellect, starts to kind of take down Bill's defenses, and Bill's starting to have a little bit of open-minded about the idea of God, Bill's old prejudice rises up in him. And he thinks about the chicanery of man and man's inhumanity to man and all the wars and all the poverty and all the famine in the world. And he pushes away the idea of God. And Ebby doesn't get defeated by that. He just starts again. And this goes on for a long time, for hours. And if you've ever talked to a new guy about God and they're belligerent and they're argumentative, you know that it can wear you out. And I think it wore Ebby out. And I don't think out of spirituality, and I don't think out of a great relationship with God. I think out of frustration from talking to a drunk who's still drinking, Ebby said something that I believe changed the course of history for you and me. And what he said to Bill, I believe out of frustration, was, I don't know, Bill. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? Now, Bill Wilson, grandiose egomaniac alcoholic of my type, thinks this to himself: choose my own conception of God. You know, that's a great idea. You know, it's about time somebody let me do this. And at that moment, the hoop that you and I have to jump through just got a lot bigger. What my sponsor did on my third night of sobriety by asking me to go home and pray is he had me actually starting to take the actions contained in the second step before I knew I was working the second step. He knew that as long as I did the action, that the rest would take care of itself. But as long as I was stuck behind an intellectual fortress, that I'm not going to do this until I understand it. I can't do it till I believe in it. I can't do it till it makes sense to me. There'd be no progress. Page 44 of We Agnostics, the second paragraph. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. For who? For us. So Memorial Day, Monday this year, by ambulance, my brother-in-law, Robert, my wife's brother, was brought to our house, and Robert was dying, and he's been dying for some time, and we decided to bring him home and have hospice at our home. And the last 2 weeks of his life, he spent at our house, and we waited on him hand and foot, and we spent many sleepless nights with him. And we held his hand, and we kissed his forehead, and we told him that he was loved. And we tried to create an environment so his last days on this earthly plane were surrounded by people that loved him. And if I had gone to Robert and I said, Robert, I know you're dying from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and it's a progressively fatal disease that you have, which he did. And I said, you know, you can beat this thing by living on a spiritual basis. I don't think Robert would have argued with me. But one of the things about alcoholism is it's the only disease that we don't think we have. That we believe it might kill us, but it's not going to kill us today, right? Only an alcoholic is going to have problems with this idea that living by spiritual principles will serve the problem. On page 45, second paragraph down, it says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. And then one of the short sentences in the big book, obviously. But where and how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself that will solve your problem. I thought you were going to teach me not to drink. I thought my problem was I drank too much whiskey, and when I drink too much whiskey, I can't stop, and I take absurd actions, and I hurt the people around me, including myself. I thought my problem was drinking. Now, I'm in the 4th chapter of the book, We Agnostics, and it tells me that my problem is lack of power, and that if I'm going to live happily and usefully whole, I'm going to have to find this power, and that this entire book is about finding that power. That's what it just said in black and white. So I'm finding out that my misconceptions about sobriety, about my drinking, about my alcoholism, and even about Alcoholics Anonymous, by the time I get to the 4th chapter, I'm finding out that I was wrong about a lot of stuff. You see, I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-seeking, self-delusion, and self-pity. Any one of those things, which is the alcoholic propulsion system that we're going to talk about in the 3rd step, but any one of those things can kill me dead. But my favorite is self-delusion. Now, self-delusion is something, a delusion is a false psychotic belief. It means something that lives in my head. It's something that I think is true that just isn't true. A self-delusion is something I think about myself to be true, and I'm the only one. Nobody else thinks that about me. How many people have you known that said, you know, I'm really a kind person? You're thinking, who are you talking about? You know? And one of the self-delusions that I had was that I'm actually a wonderful human being. Just ask me. I just drink too much sometimes. If you took the booze away from me, I'm a wonderful human being. My first grant sponsor used to delight in telling me, listen, whiskey didn't make you what you were. It exposed you for what you were. And I disagreed with that. Now, I'm quick to tell somebody I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief in a drunken state, but I did not believe I was capable of those things in a sober state until I continued to lie, cheat, and steal sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started to become open-minded that this thing called alcoholism is about a lot more than drinking. I started to become open-minded to the idea that perhaps the ticket they tear at the door to Alcoholics Anonymous to get in this joint is I have to stop drinking to start working the rest of the program. That in it of itself is not a solution. But I thought it was, because I've been brainwashed by the time I get here that I just have to stop drinking and everything will be fine. Now, the best persuader that there's maybe more to the problem than that is what? The irritable, restless, discontent nature that overtakes me sober in Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor, a home group, going to 14 meetings a week, setting up, cleaning up, going out for coffee, doing all the little things that everybody says to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going crazy in AA, doing what I think is suggested. But what I'm doing is I'm participating in the activities of the fellowship. I am not participating in the actions contained in the program of action described as Alcoholics Anonymous in the big book. So now I start to have this idea that lack of power is my dilemma. How do I know that? Well, I'm doing the best I can. My God, I'm living in Alcoholics Anonymous. 7 days a week, 2 meetings a day, setting up, cleaning up, yes sir, no sir, what can I do, how can I be helpful? My goodness, I have never made an effort this strong towards my recovery, and I'm just as crazy. I'm just as crazy as I was without Alcoholics Anonymous. So I start to understand lack of power and what it looks like. What does that look like in my life? I don't have the power to fix what's wrong with me. I start to understand that I'm going to need more than the human power where this is concerned. Page 46 in the big book, Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to set aside prejudice, it doesn't mean that I don't have prejudice. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing to argue with you about God and how he doesn't exist and all that. It just means for 5 minutes, kid, can you set it aside? Can you give it a rest? We know you don't believe in God. We know you think this is all a bunch of spiritual hooey. Can you set that aside for 5 minutes? Okay, I'm going to set that aside and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. We commence to get results. What are the results? God, I don't want it to be true, but I can't deny it. I get up in the morning after being on my knees praying to a God I don't believe in, and I feel better. Do I believe in God? No. Do I feel better? Yes. I get on my knees, down on my bed. I ask God, I thank God for keeping me sober that day. Do I believe in God? No. Do I feel better? Yes. It's a funny thing about feeling. You know, everything that every human being does from the time they wake up in the morning to the time they go to bed, they're doing it to produce a feeling. Everything we do, where we chose to work for a living, who we decide is going to be our life partner, what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, all these things, there's a process going on. We're trying to take actions that what? Make us happy. Nobody goes through their day going, I think I'll do this. That should make me miserable. That'll be good. The problem with the alcoholic, at least this type of alcoholic, is I think I'm really good at making myself happy. How do I know that? Because I never stop thinking of ways to do it. What does my experience tell me about my ability to make myself happy? I suck at it. And that's hard to explain to people when you're back in the ER and you have the same ER doctor stitching up your head, only it's the other side of the head. And he goes, weren't you just in here Tuesday? And you go, yeah, that was me. Funny story. And he asks you what happened. You can't tell him the truth, but what's the truth? Well, just trying to make myself happy. Kind of overshot the mark a little bit. But what were we doing out there? What were we doing with all that nonsense? What were we doing with all that drinking and all that? We were trying to change the way we felt. Why did we want to change the way we felt? Because we didn't like the way it made us feel. But when it suggested to us that this relationship with God and taking these simple spiritual actions might actually make us happy, our intellect slams that door closed. So is the second step about belief, or is it about open-mindedness? Oh. I'll tell you, I've known a lot of people that claim to believe, but you couldn't get them to do anything. And I've seen a lot of people that claim they didn't believe, but they had open-mindedness, which produced willingness, so they could take actions they didn't believe in, and they commenced to get results immediately. So the belief isn't really important. It's about the open-mindedness. So was I open-minded? I acted like a guy, like Sheldon said, a guy that was willing to believe in God. What does a guy that's willing to believe in God do? He takes the actions we talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when does this stop? Never. What happens if it stops? We start to lose the spiritual magic. We start to lose the things that we found when we were new. I'll tell you a story. And I'm 15 years sober, right? And I go to a lot of meetings. I've always gone to a lot of meetings. And I'm in a meeting, about 15 years sober, and a lot of new guys in this meeting. It's a discussion meeting, and it's kind of a loose format. I just happen to be there. And they're calling a new guy after new guy after new guy. And I'm kind of sitting there with my 15 years, on the fast track to bleeding deacon. I know how AA should be run, and sitting in my throne of contempt, And they call this one new guy, and he goes, yeah, 32 days sober, and everybody applauds. I'm like, yeah, that's terrific, Talk to me when you got 33 days, And so the guy goes, yeah, and I left the halfway house this morning, I'm going to that job, that crappy job I got, and I'm feeling bad. I was feeling bad this morning, I got a lot of regret, got a lot of things I did wrong in my life, and I was thinking about my family, and particularly my grandfather. My grandfather, he loved me. That man loved me, and all I did was I stole from him, and I lied to him, and, he never got to see me sober. It breaks my heart. And as I'm walking along thinking about my grandfather, this white pigeon flies out of nowhere, and it lands right in front of me. It made me stop in my tracks, and I looked at the white pigeon. I said, hello, white pigeon. And the pigeon looked up at me, and it went, cool, cool, cool. And it looked me right in the eyes. It looked right through me. This white pigeon, it didn't fly away. It just stood there staring at me. And in that moment, I knew that was my grandfather. And I got to tell you, it was a hell of a God shot. And it raised my spirits, and I thought, my grandfather, he knows I got sober. He's in heaven. watching me get sober. And I said, I got to stay sober for my grandfather, you know, and I'm good. It's good to be to me today. And everybody applauds, and it's so spiritual. And I'm thinking, oh, you got to love the newcomer. Oh, my God. Oh, yeah. God tapped your grandfather, turned him into a pigeon, sent him down to say hi to you. Yeah, okay. And they call in the next guy. Next guy goes, well, you know, I'm leaving the halfway house today, and I'm going to that job that I hate, you know, and I don't have any money. I don't have any money because I don't get paid for 2 days, you know, and I smoke, so I'm thinking, great, I'm going to be irritable, restless, and discontented. This job I don't like because I don't have any cigarettes. And I don't want to borrow cigarettes because I've been bumming cigarettes, and now guys are teasing me about bumming. I don't know. And I'm walking down the street, and I'm pissed off. I look down, there's $10. $10 sitting in the middle of the sidewalk. I look around, there's nobody around. And I look up and I go, thank you, God. And I pick up the $10 and I was able to buy cigarettes. And I had cigarettes a day for work. And it was a real God shot, I got to tell you. And I'm like, okay. So now God's up in heaven. He's going, look, Billy needs $10. We don't want him to have a bad day. We'll just float this sucker down. Right about there. And Billy. Perfect. Well, running the universe is tough work. And I'm sitting there and I'm judging these two newcomers with their pigeon and $10 bill God shots. A little voice comes in my head and it says, when was the last time you had a God shot? And I thought about it. I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember the last time I had a God shot. And the voice said, didn't you used to get those all the time when you were new? All the time. And I asked myself, what is the new man doing in his 30, 60, 90 days of sobriety that I no longer was doing at 15 years of sobriety? And then I realized it. They were looking for God. I had become so comfortable that I had a relationship with God, that I believed in God, and I was quick to talk to you about it. I was quick to explain the second step to you, the third step to you, the seventh step to you, the 11th step to you. I can tell you all about God. What do you want to know? Having a problem with your spiritual relationship? I can tell you all about it. Yet guys that are 30 days sober are having a more intimate experience with this power greater than themselves that we talk about than I am at 15 years, because they're doing the thing that I forgot to do, that I was taught in my first 30 days, that we have to seek. At 15 days of sobriety, I made a conscious effort that from that day forward, I was going to look for God in all the things. I was going to look for God in my home. I was going to look for God at work. I was going to look for God when I was driving. I was going to look for God in the eyes of my friends. I was going to look for God for the eyes of my enemies. I was going to look for God. And I'm not perfect at it, but I'll tell you what, I see God all the time because I'm looking for him, and he's everywhere. But if I don't look, I won't see him. And I forgot that lesson, and you can forget that in Alcoholics Anonymous. We talk about the second step like this is something you do when you're new, right? You come to believe that the power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. Oh, no. I mean, I got second step issues going on in my life right now I won't bore you with. But the reality is, do I believe that God is the answer? That's a short form, the second step. Am I willing to stay in that process where I can come to believe, where I can relearn again and again that quite important, as the big book says, quite important was the discovery that living by spiritual principles would solve all of my problems. Do I believe that? Sheldon already talked about the second step question on page 47. I want to talk about why the second step question becomes so easy. Let's go to page 55. First paragraph, yet we have been seeing another kind of flight of spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but we liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or another, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feelings we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. You drop back onto page 53, and it says, faced with the proposition that God either is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? So the second step becomes a lot easier if I come to believe that deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured. I may not be able to feel it clearly. I may not be able to see it clearly because it may be obscured by what? By pomp, by circumstance. I'm in so much trouble, it cuts me off from God. I'm full of so much resentment, it cuts me off from God. I'm full of so much fear, it cuts me off from God. I have so much guilt and remorse, it cuts me off from God. It may be obscured by circumstance. It may be obscured by worship of other things. If only I had the right girl, the right money, the right job, then I'd be okay. I'm worshiping false idols. I don't know that about myself. But in the final analysis, deep down inside every man, woman, and child, it's only there that he may be found. So what I'm looking for, I'm looking with. I no longer have to bar my door and sequester myself at a table. And when God shows up and knocks on the door, I don't have to scream at the door, go away, I'm looking for God. He's already with me. He's as much a part of me as the feelings I would have for a friend. So I start looking at this differently. What if that's true? This is the part about the seeking. We give ourselves permission to ask questions. What if it's true? What if there is a God, individual to me, individual to you, but we're all connected? What if he is with me right now? What if he's been with me always? What if I never knew it? What if I started to live my life like he's here right now? I don't have to do anything. I don't have to earn his respect. I don't have to earn his love. I don't have to have earn the right to have a relationship with me. What if he loves me? What if it's all true what they're saying to me? How magnificent would that be? Can I set aside my prejudice? Can I set aside my fear for 5 minutes? Can I just go out on a limb for just a minute? And can I say, what if it was true? What if he was here, deep down inside me? What if what I'm looking for my whole life I've been looking with and I just didn't know it? What other literature backs that up? We go to the back of the book in Spiritual Experience on page 567. And they were talking about, in the first few paragraphs here, the white light experience. And the problem with the white light experience, that Bill Wilson had this white light experience, our co-founder, so other people felt like if they didn't have one, they were getting cheated. Because you know alcoholics. Some of us will go out to dinner tonight after this, and we will order the same thing. And if Sheldon and I happen to order a T-bone steak, and we both order it medium rare, when the server brings it, he will look at my plate, and I will look at his. And we will be interested in only one thing. Is yours bigger? That's it. And so when we hear that Bill Wilson had a white light spiritual experience, we want one too. What it's telling us is most of us have what's Williams James, the philosopher, said, we had the educational variety because they developed slowly over a period of time. Bottom paragraph on page 567 says, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, the white light experience, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the education variety because they develop slowly over a period of time. This is what's important to me. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the most important questions I ever learned to ask my sponsor was this: how am I doing? And if my sponsor said, you're doing good, kid, it had to be enough for me that day. Because there were days I didn't feel like I was doing good. There were days I felt like I was crazy. There were days I felt everybody in AA was doing better than me. There were days where I felt like I should be better than this by now. And I can still suffer from that today. So it's very important that we understand that quite often the people around us are seeing the change long before we do it ourselves. And you know, that makes sense because when we were out there drinking, tearing our lives apart, who knew it first, our families or us? Who knew it first, the people in our neighborhood or us? Our boyfriends and girlfriends or us? Weren't we always surprised when they first started showing up in our lives, and they started talking to us about their drinking? You know, I love you, you're a great guy, but Jesus Christ, even a train stops sometimes, kid, you know. And we were always surprised, weren't we? Like, why are you coming at me with this? I'm just having a little bit of fun, and we had no idea what they were seeing. Because quite often, the friends of this newcomer were aware of the change, the destructive change in my life long before I was myself. And that happens when we get well. People around us are going to notice this long before we understand what's happening to us. He finally realizes he's undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. Isn't that what I want? Don't I need a profound alteration in my reaction to life? What's my old reaction to life? I can't take it. I can't live life on life's terms. I can do it for the short haul, but when I try to do it for the long haul, you know what happens when I'm sober? I'm rendered irritable, restless, and discontent. Something's got to change. Something big has to happen in my life or I'm not going to make it. I can't take the pain of sobriety. Something has to change in my reactions to life. But I experience this profound alteration in my reaction to life. How do you know that's happened? Something happens in your life that's happened 1,000 times, 100 times, and you know it. And intuitively, you act differently. Something that you used to get defensive about, something you used to defend yourself about, something you used to go on the attack about, something you go into self-pity about, rolls off you like water off a duck's back. And you don't even think about it at the moment. It's later that night, you're laying in bed, and you go, that's weird. That usually eats my lunch. And it was no big deal. And you'll go, that's a profound alteration in my reaction to life. That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. I have tapped an unsuspected inner resource I presently identify with my own conception of God. Why was it unexpected? I never used it. I never looked for it. I never, ever in my life asked the most important question I'm allowed to ask as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, all my life I asked, what do you want me to be? What do they want me to be? What do I think I should be? I never asked, what would God have me be? Never. And so by asking that simple question, what I found is because if the book is true, then deep down inside every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea. When I ask that question, because God is already here, what will happen? I will get an answer. And so what starts to build my second step experience is asking the question and finding that there's an answer. There's always been an answer. I just never asked the question. I have this unexpected inner resource. I can go to God right now when I'm new, when I'm 5 days sober, when I'm 50 days sober, when I'm 10 years sober. When I can do it right now. I can close my eyes. I can get quiet. I can be in any situation about my life, and I can go, okay, I know what I want to do. I know what they want me to do. I'm going to set all that aside for a minute. I'm going to ask this. What would you have me do, Dad? And I will get an answer, which proves there is this unsuspected inner resource. So what do we start to do? We start to seek. And because we are sober, we have this great gift. And it's not the physical sobriety. That's like I said, that's the ticket we tear at the door to get in here. Here's the gift now. For a lot of us that have been drunken out of our minds for so long, we are now sober. And we do what we do, and we get what we get, and we're able to remember it. We do what we do, and we get what we get, and we're able to remember it. So we start to pay attention. Well, I was really a jerk yesterday. Were you connected with God? No, I was not. You know, I was pretty good yesterday. Didn't miss any opportunities. I had a good spirit. I didn't get tired easily. How was your conscious contact? Not bad. Pretty good, actually. And we start to really find that the proof is in the pudding. We start to track. How does my life go when I'm connected with this power, and how does my life go? And we don't even know if we're connected or not. We don't even know if it's happening. We're just trying. We're slowing down enough to ask the question, what would God have me do? What is a guy who's come to believe that a power greater than himself could restore him to sanity? What does he do? He seeks. How does he seek? By asking questions, by asking for guidance, by looking for the existence of God in all areas of our life. And when we stay in that process, what we find is what the book says in We Agnostics. We find that God does not make too tough terms with those that earnestly seek him. What we're going to look for, we're going to look with. Let's take a break for about 10 minutes. Thanks. Alcoholic. Just for the clock watchers, we'll definitely be done by 9:30, just to let you know. We're going to pick up here on the third step. And I want to start on page 60. Being convinced, and what are we being convinced of? And that's the ABCs, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, which refers to step 1. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, step 2. And that God could and would if he were stopped, also step 2 in my opinion. So being convinced now that I've taken the first 2 steps properly, I'm at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? Now, step 3 for me was really more of a problem than step 2. Step 2 I wasn't really too concerned with, but step 3 to me seemed like a pretty big commitment. I thought to myself, if they mean what it says on the page, this is pretty big stuff. And so I'm going to meetings with people that are like studying the book and quoting the book, and they're talking about these other definitions. You know, when we decide to turn our will and our life, when they say will and life, they really mean our thoughts and actions, that from this point forward, we're going to let God run our lives. And I don't know if I want to do that early in my sobriety. That seems like an awfully big commitment. I understand that I almost died from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I completely agree that I hurt everybody that had the misfortune of caring about me. I understand that I've been an utter failure at the game of life, but this is kind of a large commitment. And I'm not real thrilled with the idea of it. And once again, I think our sponsors come to the rescue, at least mine did. You know, and I think the simplest way, I'm going to backtrack, you know, and we're going to talk more about the literature contained in this. It's actually in the book. But the simplest way to look at the third step is it's not that big a deal. And that was one of the first things my sponsor told to me. He said, listen, we're making a decision to turn our will and life over the care of God. There's no action really contained in the third step that's going to make that happen. You're making a decision in the third step that you want this relationship with God, that you've decided that you'll go to any length for victory over alcohol, and you're going to have this in your life no matter what it takes to have occur. And that the action required for you to turn your will and life over the care of God is going to be contained in steps 4 through 9. That you don't have to worry about it. You haven't done anything yet. You've made a decision. The way you're going to find out if you've really made a decision is it'll be followed by the actions contained in steps 4 through 9. Because a true decision will always be followed by action. Now, if you don't do anything after you make this decision in step 3, what you've really done is you've had an intention. You intended to pay the money back. You intended to say you're sorry. You intended to go to work that day. You intended not to be a thief anymore. You just didn't do it. And this is no different than all these things in my life that I had an intention for. I didn't follow through with action. So I can make a decision in the third step, and the deciding factor on when something's going to happen or not is going to be determined by whether I take steps 4 through 9. And that's the most simplistic form of the third step. But I think it has much greater significance spiritually than that, because the book gives us a couple of clues to that when it says we thought well before taking this step. So why was I willing to take this third step? Why would I be willing to have this? Well, first of all, some self-delusions about myself had to be proven that I was wrong about those things in my early sobriety. I started to find out some things about myself that indicated to me that the problem went a lot further than just drinking whiskey. Because remember, I have the self-delusion that I'm an absolutely perfect human being. The only thing that I did wrong is I drank too much whiskey. You take the whiskey away, I'm a wonderful guy, just ask me. Liar, cheat, and a thief, but impossible in a sober state. So now I'm about 45 days sober, and my sponsors got me this horrible job working as this framer or laborer on this framing crew. And I'm undisciplined. I'm an undisciplined newcomer, living at my sister's house, hopelessly in debt, warrants for my arrest, no car, just gotten back to work after a year, doing work I suck at, I'm no good at. And I've got to get up early. I mean, I've got to be up at 4 in the morning if I'm going to eat that day, because I don't have money to buy my lunch. So I've got to make cheap meat sandwiches and grab some potato chips and maybe a couple of bottles of water and put them on a little pal lunchbox, or I don't eat that day. And most days I was able to get up and do that. And this one particular day I'm undisciplined and I slept in and I'm running out the door to go get picked up to go work at this job I'm going to go bleed at for 8 hours, and thinking about how hungry I'm going to be. And I'm always left the same way out of my sister's house. I went through the laundry room, which led to the man door into the garage, and I'd make a left and go out the other man door in the garage and head down the hill. And this particular day I'm running through there, and there right on the washing machine is my sister's purse. I remember thinking to myself, why does she do that? Why does she leave it right there? Why does she tempt me? And I don't know, maybe because she thought I joined AA and I was sober and she could trust me, and a foolish woman. And I remember this one day that I decided, you know, I'm just going to look. I'm just going to look. So I went in her purse and I opened her wallet and there was all this cash. You know, I got the devil and the angel on my shoulders and they're arguing about it, but I took $20. And I instantly felt terrible about it. It's like, oh my God, I'm sober in AA. I just stole $20. But I got to tell you, I spent it. You know what I mean? A couple of bucks even made it into the seventh tradition. And it was, you know, 4 days or so before I got my paycheck. And I'm telling you, that was the longest 4 days of my life, because I know I'm going to get caught. And now I'm going to have to explain how I'm stealing sober as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous living in my sister's house. So I was a nervous wreck. And I finally got my paycheck and I cashed, and the very first order of business was to take $20 and sneak it back into my sister's wallet. And I remember getting away with that and thinking, man, that was awful. I learned a lot about myself. I will never do that again. And I didn't any more than 5 or 6 more times. And now you fast forward and I'm in the amends process. And I remember sitting down with my sister and having to make formal amends and talking to her about all the things that I was fairly certain that she knew about. And when I was done with that, I said, now I got to talk to you about something I don't think you know anything about. She said, what would that be? I said, I stole from you. She goes, oh, I know you stole from me. I go, no, I did this sober in your house as a sober member of AA. And she goes, well, what did you do? And I told her the whole story. I said, I was stealing $20 from your wallet, and on payday, I'd slide it back in. I'd swear I'd never do it again, and I must have done that 5, 6, 7 times. And I have no idea how that makes you feel. I have no idea how I can make that right. I am so embarrassed, and I am so sorry. And I know she's going to light me up. She's going to blast me. And what she said was this: oh, thank God. I'm so glad you're telling me. I thought I was losing my mind. I go in my wallet. I knew I had $60. I got $40. I go in my wallet. I know I got $40. I got $60. I thought I was going crazy. Thank you so much for telling me. I said, well, I just want to be of service. And so I start to be open-minded, not because I'm reading stuff in the book and going, oh, that makes good intellectual sense. That makes sense to me. I agree with that. I start to be open-minded because I'm experiencing the things that they're talking about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. On the bottom of page 60, where it says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost on collision with somebody or something, even though our motives are good. So how does that show up in my life, sober and Alcoholics Anonymous? How does that show up? I'm in conflict with everybody and everything. How does that manifest itself? How does that show up? How am I in conflict? I'm overly sensitive. I'm defensive. It's easy to hurt my feelings. I'm running my sponsor on almost a daily basis, talking about how that guy's pushing my buttons. And you go, well, you know, if you didn't have a button that big, it'd be kind of hard to push. And I don't think he's understanding. I got a big deal every day. And I mean a big deal. Not a small deal. I got a big deal. I'm talking life and death deal every day. I don't remember any of them to this moment, but I had big deals every day. And I'm wearing my sponsor out. I am wearing him out with my big deals because I'm coming to him every day and I'm grabbing him. I'm monopolizing his time and I'm telling him about what's wrong in the world, what's wrong with my sobriety, what's wrong with the other AA members, what's wrong with this guy, what's wrong with this girl. And I just wore him out. In fact, at one point he just said, okay, that's it. He goes, from now on, we're going to evoke the 72-hour rule. And I'd never heard of that in AA, not in a discussion meeting, not in a book study, nothing, you know. So he's making up stuff. And what he told me is, he goes, listen, man, you come to something with me, I say 72-hour rule, you're not allowed to talk about it with another AA member, you're not allowed to complain about it, you're not allowed to talk to me about it, you're not even allowed to pray about it. You turn it over once to God, you leave it in his hands, and we're going to leave that alone, see if God can take care of it. And then after 72 hours, if it's still a problem for you, then I'll give you an action to take. So it seemed to me like overnight, everything I brought him, he'd go, 72-hour rule, and I go, damn it! And I come to him with the next thing, 72-hour rule, damn it! You know, and I remember this one time, I was really resentful. It was life and death, and I was going to go kill somebody, because I'm always going to kill somebody, right? I'm not going to talk to somebody. I don't have conflict. I'm going to kill him, you know. And I go to my sponsor, tell him, the latest guy I'm going to kill, and he goes, 72-hour rule, and I exploded at him. I go, you don't understand. In 72 hours, I won't be pissed anymore. And I'm completely missing the point of the exercise. So I'm trying to live by self-propulsion. I'm trying to live by self-will, sober and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm always in collision with somebody or something. I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, though what? Though I usually don't think so. I mean, I think that should be our universal AA t-shirt, though he usually doesn't think so. That would be perfect. I mean, I sponsor a lot of guys, and I've been sponsored a long time, and I'm telling you, that should be our theme song, because that's usually what I get when I start talking to a guy. They start explaining, well, let me explain it differently. I don't think you understood what I just said to you, because we usually don't think so. I would go to my sponsor, and I would tell him a long-winded story about what's going on with me. He'd go, that's okay, kid. You're just scared. And I'd explode in anger. Scared? I'm not scared. I'd show you scared. I don't get scared. And the truth was, I look back, I was terrified. Now, why isn't it that I couldn't see that in myself or accept that about myself? Why do I see that these are manifestations of running on self? I don't see that stuff in my life because I'm living in the problem. So I become open-minded about making this decision, not because I want to be spiritual, not because I want a relationship with God. I wish I was that noble. I wish I heard what God had done for you and you had become servants of God and you had this light and this love in your life and that was what attracted me. That's not what attracted me. What attracted me is you weren't as crazy as me. And I was getting worn out by untreated alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't sleep at night, and I'm exhausted. I mean, I'm going to 2 meetings a night. You know what that's like when you're new and you go to 2 meetings, the last meeting's over at 9:30, and then you clean up, and now it's about 10 o'clock. And you're in that second meeting, you were falling asleep, and old-timers are elbowing you, and you're waking up, and you're drinking coffee just to stay awake, and you're dreaming of sleep. You just want to go home and go to bed. You know, and then you're ready to leave the clubhouse and somebody goes, hey, who wants to go out for coffee? And you hear yourself going, coffee? Coffee sounds good. I'd love to have another cup of coffee. That sounds really good. I've only had about 10 cups tonight. A double espresso sounds good right now. You know, and now you're out for coffee and you're telling war stories till midnight, you know, and you get home, you got to get up in 4 hours. You know you're going to sleep like a log. And I'd lay down in bed, man, and my eyes would roll up like shades and it'd be the Don Landis Film Festival, night after night after night. You know, oh, God, I remember when I did that. Oh, I thought I forgot that. Oh, Jesus, 5th grade. You know, just on and on. So I'm not sleeping at night. I'm defensive. I'm sensitive. Everything bothers me. I'm irritable. I'm restless, and I'm discontent. My reaction to sobriety is producing desperation. The desperation is propelling me towards this new life. I'm open-minded about things I would have been closed-minded about before. In We Agnostics, it says that faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded about spirituality as we had been on other matters. In this way, alcohol was a great persuader. So I was persuaded into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous by my active drinking, and the consequences of my active drinking chased me into AA. Now that I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, the results of what my head does to me in a sober state, because now it's not what you can see. Now I'm not hurting people outwardly, I'm not stealing cars, I'm not going to jail, I'm not missing work, I'm showing up in AA every night. So to the untrained eye, I'm doing better. But you can't see what's going on the inside. And what's going on in the inside is the stuff that's keeping me up at night. What's going on the inside is separating me from you. What's going on in the inside is untreated alcoholism. So I become open-minded on the God question. I'm doing the work in the second step, but I don't complete. There's no completion in the second step as I move into the third step. And I find that interesting that somehow when people are working the steps, they feel like they've completed the second step before they can do the third step. I'm still coming to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. When does that happen? Depends what day you catch me on. Some days it's in lockstep. Some days I have to re-examine it. Some days I go through things and I go, I wonder if this is a second step dilemma. You know, a long time ago, I had an old timer tell me, what if everything in your life turned out to be nothing more than a spiritual dilemma? Everything. What if everything that you labeled as a sex problem, a money problem, a marriage problem, a work problem, a society problem, a politic problem, what if everything in your life that you used, you labeled a specific type of problem? What if they all were under the envelope of one problem? Spiritual dilemma. Now, that's true, then what does that mean? If all my problems are spiritual in nature, then all my solutions must be spiritual in nature. What I've just done is not only have I simplified the things I choose to label as problems, I've simplified my solution. And so what happens in AA is I don't believe in that because I love my intellect. What do I bring to the game naturally without God? What does every human being bring to the game of life without God? My instincts, my intellect, and my emotions. I love these things about myself, right? And my instincts, my intellect, and my emotion have actually served me very well in other areas of my life. Where my alcoholism is concerned, they'll leave me dead. So these things I covet about myself actually are not assets. They're defects. when I go against my alcoholism. But does that mean I'm not going to try to take on my alcoholism in Alcoholics Anonymous with my instincts, my intellect, and my emotion? Of course I am. I'm not going to turn to God because you tell me to turn to God. I'm not going to turn to God because I think it's a good idea or I think spirituality is cool. I'm going to turn to God out of the utter failure of my human will and nothing else. And what gets me to be open-minded about the third step is the failure of my human power, sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. Failure of what? To produce good feelings. If I don't need God, then why am I miserable? And when people go, you have a spiritual deficiency, what do I say? That's not it. It's a money deficiency, a woman deficiency, a job deficiency. It's not. But the book's telling me when the spiritual malady is overcome, I straighten out physically and mentally. Only I don't think so. Sheldon?
So I've quit drinking, which is helpful by now. And I'm restless and I'm irritable and I'm discontented. And life sucks. And it feels like the color's all gone out. And I'm sober a little while and I'm starting to try this thing of imagining that God exists, but I got this knot in my stomach. It's that knot we talked about in step one that always drives me back to drinking. And I got to find a solution for that. I got to find a way out of that. I got to find a way to be comfortable in my sobriety if it's going to last long term. Or I'm going to turn into one of those guys, you've all met him, the guy at the AA club that says things like, if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any goddamn length to get it, and you want to buy that guy a drink, right? You just want to tell him if it hurts that much, bud, take the first couple on me. I want to be able to be happy in my sobriety. I want to be able to enjoy my life. I don't seem to be able to do that. Why is that? What is it that is making me feel like life is so difficult? The book says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. What do I mean by a success? What would a successful life be like? Before I came to AA, if you would have asked me what a successful life would be, it would be that I had a lot of money. If you would have asked me what it would take for me to be successful in life, it's the house on the hill. Me in a Mercedes, her in a BMW, 2-3 vacations a year, lots of dough. But I've been blessed in my life to make a lot of money at some times, and I tell you, it hasn't felt like I'm being successful. Sometimes it has. Sometimes having money, I felt like life is fun and enjoyable. But I've had periods where I've had money in my life where you would not consider it a successful life. I'm on edge still. I'm anxious. I'm uptight. We've all seen people in our lives with great abundance. Wealthy people kill themselves all the time, whether they're alcoholics or otherwise. So what is a successful life? Wouldn't a successful life better be a life no matter what my outside circumstances were, that I felt happy most of the time? Or better than happy, because happy is so tenuous. Happiness comes and goes, right? I'm happier when I'm eating chocolate than when I'm not, right? But joyful, that my life felt complete, felt whole. Wouldn't that be more of what a successful life looked like? I have this experience, it goes back maybe 10 or 15 years. I went on an AA cruise. It's a beautiful thing. If you get to go on one, they're fantastic. You get 150 alcoholics all together on this AA, on this cruise ship, abundance, right? Abundance. And when we go to Honduras on this trip. And we get off the boat and we're going diving on this little island, and we take this bus through the island, and this town that we went through, I'll never forget it. This place was a shanty town. It was no roads, just like mud tracks and shacks and the rumbled houses, and there was actually like an open sewer running down the center of this street. And the kids were playing soccer. And they had no idea how miserable they were supposed to be, right? They were laughing, having fun, kicking this. The soccer ball wasn't even round, I mean, for God's sakes, right? It was like this half-flat soccer ball. But they're having a blast. They're having a great time. We go diving and we get back on the ship and we're sitting at the dinner table when they're bringing 6 lobsters per person, right? As much steak as you want. I mean, it's sickening how much abundance there is on this boat. And me and my sponsor are sitting there together and we're noticing members of AA complaining that the lobster is too tough. The steak is too rare. Can you believe how cold and lumpy the potatoes are? And it made me think to myself, and we had this conversation about how is it possible that human beings can be so happy in such adverse poverty, yet we're able to complain in the middle of such abundance. And it became so clear that the outside circumstances aren't the things that make us happy, but we're so convinced that they are. And that if only I can get my outside circumstances is where I live, the size of the house, the kind of the furniture, what I drive, the nameplate on the vehicle, if it's the right brand or the right equipment, the right toys, the right features, the right girlfriend or wife, the right kids, the right family, the right job, the right position in my community, if I could only wear the right clothes, if I could only have enough money in the bank. If I could have enough money in the bank, then I would be happy. If only I could have enough money in the bank. I said that to my sponsor one time, and he said, "Do you know how much money you would need in the bank to be happy?" I thought about it. I mean, I could come up with a number, right? He said, "You would need enough to where you don't have to trust God." Oh, how much is that? About $10 more than you will ever have, all right? No matter how many zeros there are. But I've got this feeling that for me to have a successful life, it has to look a certain way. And so I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to try and push and fight against the world. I'm going to, as the book says, try to make my arrangements stay put. I'm going to try and get people to do as I wish, to behave the way I want them to. If you just do this, if you just say that, if I could just get that, if you just promote me, if you just shut up, if you would just behave the way I want you to behave, then I would be happy. And I go out into the world and I brush up against it and I fight against it and I struggle against it and I'm trying so hard to keep everything in place. And when you're trying to do that, is it no wonder that the result is that I'm restless, irritable, and discontented? And the problem that the people in my life has is that it's a moving target, right? If I have a vision of how my boss should behave, and if only my boss would behave this way, and he did. Do you know what the first thing that would happen once I got used to him behaving correctly? I would change the way I thought he had to behave. If my employees would only do this, then I'd be happy. Once they do that, I'd move the bar. If my wife would just do this, then what am I going to do when she does it? I'm going to change the way I would want her to behave. I'm the guy that gets a new car. And 2 weeks after I get it, it's still nice, but it's the wrong goddamn color. All right? I'm always moving the goalposts. You can't live up to what I want you to do because what I want you to do is constantly changing. And when I'm out there trying to fight against the world, I get more angst and more uncomfortable. The book says that I am a victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only I manage well. And it seems like for my entire life, I've been in this place where I have a picture of how I think the world should be. And I take all of my effort and all of my energy trying to push it to be that way. And either I'm constantly in conflict with the world about me, or I end up as what I like to call Sheldon the mope. And this is the guy that shows up right before I drink. Right before I drink, Sheldon the mope shows up, and this is Sheldon the mope. He's sober. And he says, "It just sucks. Life's just not fair. Nobody likes me. I can't get along. I can't get a break. There's no point. It's worthless. It's miserable, and I may as well what? I may as well drink." And that's just how I feel. I feel like everything's a fight and a struggle that I can't possibly win. And I try and I fight and I exhaust myself until the self-pity shows up. I go to my sponsor and I tell him that I'm just struggling with the world. I'm struggling with work. I'm struggling with my wife. I'm struggling with my job. I'm struggling with my friends. I'm struggling with my home group. And he says the craziest thing to me. He says, "What's wrong?" He said, "Isn't it simply you're just mad because you're not getting your way?" Well, yeah. That's the problem. Is that if I could just get my way, I'm not, you use this word selfish in Alcoholics Anonymous as if somehow it means something, right? I'm not selfish, right? I'm at the top of page 61. I'm the guy that thinks if I could just get my way, not only would I be happy, but everybody would be pleased, right? What I don't know is the reason that everybody would be pleased is because finally I'd shut up, right? That's what would please them. But yeah, man, if I could get my way, then I think I'd be happy. He said the craziest thing. He said, "I can give you a formula by which you will never, ever, ever have to be unhappy ever again because you didn't get your way." Well, now I'm listening. What's that? He said, "Don't have a way." Don't have a way. How do you not have a way? Right? I come into this world with my ego and my insecurity and the way that I think the world should be and this vision of how things could be and should be and would be and how bright everything would be. And if only that I could get that manipulated. Here's one of my favorite things in AA that we say. Maybe you've said this, I've said this. I always love it when the new guy says this. He says, my problem is that I'm a people pleaser. Any people pleasers in the room? Right? Question, how many people are pleased? If you're that bad at something, you should stop it immediately. And the truth is that I'm not a people pleaser. Because if I were a people pleaser, I would want to please all people. But I don't. I want to please people that can do things for me. I want to please my boss because he can let me keep my job and give me a raise. I want to please the pretty girl because she might sleep with me. I want to please the people in my home group because it will levitate my position in society. I want to please the police officer so he doesn't write the ticket. I want to please my parents because maybe they'll give me first position in the will. I don't know what the deal is, right? But I want to please people that can do things for me. And the correct name for that is manipulator. I am not a people pleaser. I am a manipulator. I am a user of people. I am a taker of things. I am somebody who believes that this black hole that is in me, if I can fill it with enough stuff that will generate enough power, that somehow I can feel good in this world. But it is a delusion because I'm a funny guy. Anybody ever do this? Anybody ever get that job? You know the job, the good job, the one that you're raving to all your friends how much you love the job. I love this job. I've said this, it's my dream job. This is my dream job, right? And 3 months later, I'm complaining about my dream job, right? I'm that guy. I'm the guy that nothing is ever good enough for because I'm constantly moving the bar. I'm constantly changing the rules. I'm the scorekeeper. And the scorekeeper can never lose. And if you can never lose, you can never really win. Everything is looked at and examined and pulled apart. And when you do that and you live that way, eventually all that's left to see is the problems. The book says our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, sighing over the sad state of the nation. The minister sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers shall all be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations are, not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-will. When you sit in judgment of the world the way I have sat in judgment of the world, when you're constantly focused on whether or not things are making you happy, whether or not things are good enough, whether or not you have enough respect, enough love, enough money, enough position. When that's your focus of your examination, because the belief is, if I can get enough, I'll be happy. The dogs of judgment always bite their master. That there can't be enough. I can't be enough and you can't be enough. That there'll never be enough and the black hole in my spirit will never get filled. So selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. That I am so focused on me and how I feel and whether or not I'm being treated right. That focus on myself, that magnifying glass that I put on the world to whether or not I'm being treated right will mean that I will never be treated right. There will never be enough. And it's a delusion that there ever will be enough. And this delusion is the thing that drives me into this self-pity. It drives me into this empty, lonely, bleak, dark, colorless place where the world just seems so empty and so hopeless. And Sheldon the mope shows up, and Sheldon the mope is thirsty. And when I'm so focused on me and I'm so focused on what I get and what I want and what I can have, I am then driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion and self-pity. Desperately trying to make myself happy in a world where my attempts to make me happy is the very thing that makes me crazy. The very thing that makes me crazy. We step on the toes of our fellows and they sometimes hurt us seemingly without provocation, but invariably we find at some point in the past we've made a decision based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. That I rub up against the world and its people, I rub up against the people at my work, the people in my family, the people in my community. Me desperately trying to get what I want to make me happy without caring about them or anyone around me. And I find myself alone and separate and cut off. And I find myself desperate and afraid, driven by these things. The book says our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And as Don said, the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. I need to find a way to break out of this trap that I'm in, this prison of my mind, this cell where I am locked in, constantly contemplating my navel, trying to find ways to make me happy. You know, it's funny. If me trying to make me happy made me happy, right? If me trying to make me happy made me happy, my sponsor would probably say, Sheldon, why don't you continue to try and make yourself happy? He'd probably think it was a good idea. He'd probably encourage it. But my problem is that every time I go to him with another idea that's supposed to make me happy, it leaves me sick. It leaves me empty and alone. The only place that I have ever found happiness, true happiness, lasting happiness, is in service to my fellow man. Now, when I'm going through these pages, I got to tell you with my sponsor, I can't really see this in my life. It's hard for, when I went through this with my sponsor, and he's telling me all this stuff, I'm like, yeah, You're talking about somebody else, not me, but yeah. Where do I get to see all this stuff? Is in the inventory process. Tomorrow we're going to start talking about step 4, but in step 4, what am I doing other than looking at the bondage of self? Looking at where my selfishness, self-centeredness, self-seeking, and fear have caused me all the problems. When I think about my life, anybody that's been in my life for any length of time, short or long, anyone that's had any meaningful contact with me, I got things to say about them, don't I? I got opinions and attitudes and problems. And yeah, the best I could ever say is, well, they're all right.